I hope you guys weren't too young when you were watching it.
A little too young, like traumatizingly young. I was like, shouldn't have been 8, watching.
No, that's a really bad idea.
It's time.
I didn't realize that there were so many Hellraiser movies until I did my research. And so I want to know why this one in particular can work as a gateway for people who may not know what Hellraiser is at all.
So, I mean, yeah, oh my God, great question. It's a complete, reimagining of this world and, these, like the puzzle box and these characters and these people. And so, I mean, even if you haven't seen any of the other films, I think that, you could definitely start with ours. Why not? I mean, it's a complete reimagining of, just of this world. And we're doing our own thing. It's our own story, using these characters and these, the box and, all of those things. And so it's not, we're trying to do our own thing. I was trying to do my own thing and, not, mimic Doug's performance, in any way, shape or form, really trying to do my own unique thing. And, I hope that people enjoy it.
Well, Clive Barker is attached to it as well. He's a producer. And it kind of, it's more of a reimagining and a reinvention, and as opposed to, because those original movies, especially the first 2 for me, you can't really replicate those. So what we kind of did is what David Bruckner did, the director, is we kind of looked at the world and really wanted to make something that was interesting and unique, but still pays homage to the original. So it if anyone hasn't seen any of the original films, this is actually, I think, a good entry point into the lore and the
it's nice
behind it.
We go through Riley's perspective, and she's kind of very unaware of everything and like the lore, and it's more about like a story of addiction as it starts off, and then it's like, oh wow, okay, this box that she stumbled upon may actually like do things that are greater than any of us understand. And so I think it's also a nice entry point for like, people who aren't maybe expecting to know anything about it, because she's kind of very much clueless and coming in from a sort of like grounded, sort of like third person perspective a little bit.
Honestly, I didn't see the 9 other ones like you're talking about. And I myself, like, I've been really very, resisting these kind of movies, because to be honest with you, I just like, they make me too afraid, too scary, and I just like cannot cope with my life after and my fears and my imagination. But I think this one, not because I'm in it, but really I watched it and I just like think like there is so much range of things that consider our desires, our life. There is so many elements that makes this one in it, and like there's a lot of humanity in it. And you know what? It's really beautifully done. It's a piece that, like, when you watch it, you really enjoy watching it, and you are just driven totally with the characters, with their journeys. It's, I think this is enough for people to kind of like enjoy it, really.
It explores thematically why we choose suffering, why we choose pleasure and pain in a constant discussion in our own heads. And I think it's always a relevant theme. And so to bring that into a modern world with modern costumes, modern characters, I think horror works best when it explores humanity. Mm-hmm. And I think that's exactly what this Hellraiser 11 is still doing. And it's I think at this time in the world, we're gonna relate to it.
When you see in this film, it's something about human nature. It's something about our desires. It's something about what we secretly wish for, what we really wish for. And in that first movie, you have that. It's about eternal life. It's about sexual desires. These movies are loaded with the legend, with core of humanity in a way. I think that's why all these movies are being made, and in our movie, we have this guy who kind of like starts moving everything. Voight, he gets into that trap of just never having enough, always wanted more and more and more, but in a really bad way. And there's this kind of like a story that, if you want something that it's kind of forbidden fruit and you're hoping you're going to get something extremely positive, you always get screwed in the end. That's why I think these movies keep being made, because you can relate to them.
For the time that it was made, the effects were insane and the story was original and is original. I mean, it's one of the coolest horror movies out there. The second one, there are parts of it that I really have to actually look away. It really makes me uncomfortable. I can't do needles. I can't do I like bugs. I save flies in my apartment, but I cannot do maggots. So, I mean, no, I really can't even think about it. It's just an incredible movie.
Dude, I mean, that reverse stop motion, I just like the effect. It's so, there's so many elements to it, but I really think they just kind of went for it. They went for it, the blood, the BDSM, I feel like the chains, they're so iconic. And so I think there's a lot of the imagery, I think, is what still stays with me, and probably Drew when we were watching when we were younger and stuff and everything. It's just, those images stick with you and it's terrifying. And so I think what was kind of cool is Bruckner, director, he really wanted to incorporate a lot of those elements too and that sort of imagery. So I feel like those sort of stand the test of time.
I hope you guys weren't too young when you were watching it.
A little too young, traumatizingly young. I was like, shouldn't have been 8, watching.
No, that's a really bad idea.
Feed it. Their blood, their pain. All for us.
When casting, what makes a perfect Pinhead, and why was Jamie it?
Well, look, I've never had the challenge of trying to, reimagine something as iconic as what Doug did. And Doug's performance of Pinhead's burned into my memory in a million and one different ways. And I mean, he is Hellraiser, so going into this, we knew we couldn't imitate it. That would never, ever work, and we needed to find a different way into the character that felt organic to us. And so from Jamie's first read, not only did she scare the living hell out of me, genuinely, I was transfixed, and that felt right. It's that Hellraiser is about not being able to take your eyes off something that terrifies you. There's a pull and a push.
Yeah. And
but she found so many different nuances in it that were different to me, and I didn't know what I was looking for. I was just trying to find a way in. But here Jamie was finding a sensuality and a curiosity in the character, and she was revealing Pinhead's affectations and desires for what she was affecting or what she was provoking in people. I think instead of being not always, although she can be pushing the outwardly intimidating buttons, at times there was this kind of silky reserve that I thought, knowing what can happen to you when you bargain with a Cenobite, I just found that completely insidious in the best way.
What is it you pray for?
Odessa, I'm a sucker for how things are made, certain scenes. Chains are obviously significant to this story. They have to be for Hellraiser. There's an incredible shot of chains kind of shooting out of Riley in slow motion. Can you just talk a bit about how you filmed that? It looks really cool.
Okay, so we had this strap around the top of my titties and went to the back.
Yeah.
And I think there wasn't even a green screen or anything. There was just amazing people behind it, and we just did a few shots of I think it was wrapped around a pole. I'm here, the pole's here, It's wrapped around my body and around the pole, and then someone's standing here and yanks it. So I just have to, it's just kind of like a pull and then like that. And there were no chains there in real life, but there were some scenes with chains. Brandon could tell you more about that because he had, you know, all that.
What? I mean, like, I looked at certain scenes where chains are in flesh and it looked practical enough.
It's actually, the chains are not practical, I think.
This part.
They were sort of, yeah, I mean, I
the
had
hooks.
Yeah, in that scene with Odessa, like it cuts to the chains coming out of me, and it was sort of like this Frankenstein of like, let's shoot a couple different ways of coming up, and they had built prosthetics around my nipples that the chains would go into, and then even the ADR was like, okay, let's scream a bunch of different ways, and that's kind of how it all came together.
Yeah, totally normal day at work. Totally.
Yeah.
I need to know about the sound design in this movie because I think it's really terrifying. And I was super impressed with how you used it to great effect in the Night House. And then here it's the clinking of chains and the sound of hooks and flesh and the movement of the puzzle boxes and all of this. So can you just elaborate on your approach to the use of sound design?
Well, the amazing Rick Schnupp, who also worked with us on the Night House, who was our designer, but also our mixer. We got started early. I mean, I think for Rick, it is, and for Ben Lovett, who composed the score, it is, this is a big, wide world full of possibilities. You know, you normally get to do like 5 cool things in a movie. With something like this, there's 50 of them, and they're all very nuanced and very particular. And you know, being an obviously enormous fan of the franchise, it's a lot of the fun came from going, you know, what would we do if we could do anything? You know, like what would the box be made out of? Like what is the ore necessarily? If it is it somewhere between stone and metal? How exactly is that going to sound? You know, what is the weight of the chains? You know, when the Cenobites open the universe, like what are the textures that are breaking and cracking? Like what does it feel like for 2 dimensions to come into intersection? So those are fun problems.
Goran, I want to get over to your character's mansion, which we eventually see later on, which to me is a work of art. I assumed that a lot of it was digital until finally you go into certain places where it seems very practical. How much of that was there?
The exterior of that house is something called Beli Dvor in Belgrade in Serbia. It's a beautiful building that it was originally set design used it. What they built digitally around it was that mesh of metal that Voight supposedly did to catch Cenobites inside. But the interior was built on the stage, actually, by our production designing team. So it was really beautiful, but it was all, you know, built in. It was all wood, you know, that looks like marble and stuff like that. So it was, they did a really good job.
And then Adam, before they kick me out of here, you mentioned Bruckner, such a fan of his. What is he like as a collaborator on a project like this?
Dude, he's so specific. He gets right in there with us. He gets energized. Like when he's like, I want it to be this. He gets into it and he's like, this is the energy, you know, like in the best way possible, because you just feel like he's there with you in the world. And there was like, it was amazing how much energy he had with like the time difference, being in Serbia, and just like also, you know, sometimes time constraints, and he just was always like, you know, there with us. And I really appreciated him for that. And I feel like it made the product even better because he's just there in the thick of it with us.
Greater delights await. We wish to see you proceed.